Okay, here we are looking at a lawnmower, just some more outdoor power equipment maintenance. So, end of season, start of season. So we've done a bit of work this season already. Just got a raker blade on here, so that's something that we often will do in the spring is change blades, put on a raker blade, and then rake. And then you always usually want to take and sharpen up your blades, right? So if you take your blade and take a file to them, sharpen it up a little bit. This is actually a new blade I'm going to throw on, yeah, your old blade's going to get all dull and banged up. So sharpening your lawnmower blades is something that you would do each year. So usually I take it off and then throw it in a vise and just clean it up with a file and just get a nice sharp edge on there. And then just be careful when you put it back on, set of gloves or something to hold the blade tight while you tighten your bolt so you don't cut yourself. So we'll change that out now. And aside from that, cleaning out your deck. So all of this junk up underneath here, you want to just take and scrape that off. Usually a really good thing to do at the end of the season so that it doesn't sit there and rust your deck out, because that all holds moisture. So the more you can scrape away before you put it away for the winter, better off you are. Okay, so here we are with the new blade that we need to take and put on, and you can see here that we've got a round hole, and we do have a couple drive pins here that will line up with most blades, but we also want to take and grab the right piece to sit in the center here. So we'll find which hole is the right size by matching it up on the shaft over there, and then drop that in there so that that hole lines up so we get that blade nice and centered. Otherwise we're going to be off to one side, and then that could give us some balance issues. Okay, so there we have it on there now, and we picked the right adapter to center that on that bolt, on that flange where the bolt goes in the shaft. And then we've got the two drive pins there driving this, and we can see that there actually is a bottom to this blade. It's a mulching blade, so it's a certain way that it goes on so that it mows the grass correctly. So we want to check that, and then just blade alignment. So that centering is really the most important part. If we were too far to one side, and we get the imbalance and the shaking, just like too many towels on one side of a washing machine. Okay, so now we're ready to check out the rest of the mower. So before winter, I would take the bag off, make sure everything's nice and empty. You don't want to leave grass and things like that in there, just moisture rusting your deck, and of course just a haven for mice and things like that. So usually what I'll do as well before winter is put in a little bit of fuel stabilizer and just dump it in there a little bit with the fuel. Just read the directions, usually like a tablespoonful or something like that, and mix that up with the fuel, and you can take and run that through there, and that's going to just help prevent a bunch of gunk and stuff building up in the carb and that sort of thing. So like a sea foam or something, some product like that with a stabilizer. Okay, so usually I do that in the winter, and then it's usually good to go. And I'll do that with about a quarter tank, so then I also get some nice fresh fuel in when we start the season. Okay, so here we have an air filter. All right, so we got an air filter here, so we want to take and pull that out and have a look there. So we've got, it's getting a little bit dirty, so it probably wouldn't hurt to change this. So throw that on the parts list. So that's a good thing to do. We won't get into cleaning the carb all up. That's sort of, I guess, a little bit beyond just sort of your basic maintenance, but that is a common thing that does need to be done on small engines. The carbs can get kind of full of dust and dirt and things like that. So keeping that air filter clean and keeping your fuel clean in the winter and putting that stabilizer in really helps, so that you don't get the varnishes and things building up inside that carburetor. Okay, so you can see down here we do have a float bowl. Okay, so sometimes we can take that off and see if there's any sediment in there and things that need to be cleaned up in there. But you do want to make sure that you're careful, and there's a little gasket or O-ring on there that you don't want to crack and break, or you're going to have to go find one of those as well. Okay, and here we have our spark plug. Okay, so we'll pull that out and have a look at that as well. Okay, so we're going to take the spark plug out here, Now I have a special spark plug socket on there, which I'll show you when we get it out. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we hold this nice and tight in as we pull on the ratchet. What we don't want to do is pull on the ratchet, put sideways pressure on this, or we're going to crack that porcelain. Okay, so here we have the spark plug out. So, I mean, we can visually inspect a few things on a spark plug, but like we've talked about before, we can't check everything. So we do want to check the electrodes and see if they're starting to burn and round out all in here and starting to burn off. And these ones still have nice square edges, and and it looks like it's still in pretty good shape. We want to check and see sort of what the condition is like, right? So if it's really, really wet with oil and potentially burning some oil, if it's all caked and carboned up, or if it's, fairly clean, a nice light golden brown is good. This is a little bit dark, probably running a little bit rich, but overall it looks not too bad. What you can't check though is this porcelain goes all the way through here, and it can crack internally and then cause a short. Instead of insulating all the way down to this electrode, it shorts out and current will take the path of least resistance and go straight through to the metal. So you can't check that internal component and the resistor and things that are inside there. So it's hard to check everything. So just as a good maintenance, it is good to change it every now and then. If it's starting to look pretty dirty and gross, just put a new plug in. So pretty straightforward process there. So when we take and put that back in, and we want to put it back in with our fingers. And we really want to make sure that we're threading that properly. Don't want to just take and put a socket on there and thread that in with a socket right off the bat. If you can get in there with your fingers, or an old boot sometimes work. If you take a longer boot off of an automotive plug, you can put that on and it'll help you get the reach, but you won't cross thread it with that boot. The boot will just slip if those threads catch. Okay, so we can take and do that as well. Another thing that we can do if we're putting it back in, or what we should do, is gap the plug. So I had checked that before I got back on here with the video with you. So just check the plug gap with a plug gap tool and make sure that it's the correct gap for the engine, which we would spec out. So that's something else that you can do with your plug as well before you put it in. Okay, so then we snug it up. We don't want to go too terribly tight. I'm going to pause the video again so I can hold this nice and still. But yeah, you want to be snug but not over tight. Okay, so we've got that hand tight. There are often torque specs for plugs, but sometimes they're quite hard to find. And so just having that proper feel for it is important too. So hand tight, not over tight. Now we want to take a look at the plug boot as well. So if we look inside here, we want to make sure there's no rust or corrosion in that plug wire end that clips onto this portion of the plug there. Okay, so we'll look at that. We want to make sure there's no rips or cracks or tears in the boot. Make sure that rubber's nice and pliable. Okay, then we can take and put that back on and make sure you hear the snap. Okay. Okay, so that's sort of the basic maintenance things for air, fuel, and spark without getting too deep into it. And then the only other thing to do would be to check your oil. Okay, so we want to take and have a look at that and see what the condition's like. If it's starting to get dirty, I just like to change it. And then every couple of years or so, I'll change mine anyway, just because of length of time. But if I don't put too many hours on the lawnmower, I don't generally change it every season if it looks nice and clean. So this is getting a little bit dirty. Not too bad yet, probably okay, but I will likely do a change on that as well and drain that out and get some fresh stuff in there for the season. So we want to check that before we get going. And then just checking over all your throttle linkages and things like that, making sure that, your choke lever and your throttle linkage and your safety start and all those cables are moving nice and free and not, rusted and seized up from the winter. And that's pretty much it for a lawnmower.